Okay, this is on page 425, rather page 418, number 25, where you're going to be getting a percent of increases for prices. So we can see we have 10 prices over here. I have made one of them 4.0. So I think to make this even clearer, I'm going to change it to 10.0. The rest are going to be a little bit more challenging to read in our head and calculate. So we'll probably use a calculator for that just to make sure. So the first thing we need is an integer, and we'll just call it percent increase. And now remember that the actual percent increase based upon the user is going to be in percent. So like 15%. So you need to calculate that by dividing it by 100. So what we'll do here is we're going to do a float, and we'll call it actual percent. So the user is going to put in something like 15%, and then we're going to divide that by 100. Remember, we need to make sure that we're not doing integer division. So without any real error checks right now, we're going to go cout what is the percent of increase. Notice I put in a question mark and then a space. I do not put in an end line, so we stay on the same line. Then we're going to do cin percent increase, which will be an integer. So now our actual increase is going to be divided by 100. So we're going to do actual percent equals percent increase divided by 100. Now, what's wrong with this? Going once. There's something wrong with this formula. Move. All right, so I'll give you a hint. What type of data is percent increase?
It's an integer division.
So you have integer division. Remember, so if I put in 15, it's going to take 15 divided by 100, turn it into 0.15. It'll drop everything after the decimal point, so it'll be 0. So we need to do one of two things. We either need to put 100.0, or we can put in float percent increase, or double. Doesn't really matter. So if you get the warning message that says you may lost data, suggests blah, 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 that's no big deal. So now we're getting it in here. So the next step we need to do is take the prices, which we're going to read from the array, and we're going to give it a price increase of 15%. So I am not a big fan of doing couts with calculations. I just think there's too much of a margin of error when you do that. So remember that I will be taking off 5 points if there's any calculations within a cout. There are 1 or 2 times that you really need to do it, but in this particular case, you should not. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put in another variable, and we'll call it price increase. And remember also, some of you lost points because variables were not initialized or did not comment them. Now, every one of these things should have a comment as to what they are. So if you don't comment your code, then of course it's going to cost you some points, even though your algorithm may be 100% on the money. So you want to make sure that you're actually commenting these as much as possible. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to do our array. So our array has. Now, I don't want to stand there and use this hard code of 10. So let's create a constant integer, and we'll call it max prices. And we'll change that at 10. So why are we doing this? Well, we're using this 10 here, and we're going to be using it at least one more time. So it makes more sense that we are going to hard code it with a constant. So then if we want to make changes, we can just change it. For instance, if we wanted to have 20 prices, then we only need to change this. So now, of course, we're going to do max prices. So that takes care of this. So now we need to do our for loop. So now we're doing for, that's assuming I can spell, for integer I equals. Now what do we start at, 1 or 0? And why? Hey, 50-50 chance. If I said, here's $100, you have a 50-50 chance of winning the lottery. And if you win the lottery, you get $100,000. Would you take a chance of giving me $100 to win $100,000 if there was a 50-50 chance?
We start on 0.
You start at 0. All right. So all this, I knew I could get it out of you. Why do we start at 0? Why not 1? Ah, man, I got you guys. Got to stop having Saturday morning classes. Remember, arrays start at offset 0. That's why you need to start 0. 0 is the first element. That's why you start at 0. I equals 0. I less than max prices. Why less than max price? Because we're going to go from 0 to 9, not to 10. And then, of course, we're going to increment I. We have the end main function. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our actual price increase. So that's really easy to do. So price increase is nothing more than the price times the percent. So let's see, we are float, integer, and actual price. So we need to calculate the actual percentage as well, which we actually did over here. So what we're doing here is we're getting our prices of I, and then we're multiplying by the percent, actual percent. And then, did I spell something wrong? Yes, prices. So now what we need to do is, are we going to physically change the prices itself, or are we going and inside the array or not? So let's go back to the instructions and see what it says. The program should increase each element's value by 15%, increasing after increasing price to display the contents of the array. Okay, so in this particular case, we're actually going to change the prices. So what we'll do here is prices of I equals, now I'm going to do it two different ways, equals prices of I plus price increase. Or, the way I prefer to do it is prices of I plus equals price increase. Now, we can't leave them both in there because then it'll get increased twice. So I'm going to comment this out. You use the one that you're more comfortable with. This is the preferred way of doing it. It's just maybe a little bit extra writing, but I think it just basically says, okay, we're adding price increase to the prices of I and storing it. So now we actually have it written where it should work for each one. So let's print out what the prices of I is. And to do it, to test, let's use 10%. And let's see how well that goes. So I think what I'll do also, we'll do prices of I, but we'll also do the price increase. And I have an extra thing. So let's get rid of this. And this is a quick way to determine, to make sure our algorithm is correct. Remember one thing, a syntax error is not that big a deal because it's going to get found by the compiler. A logic error can give you wrong information, and obviously that could be a wrong, bad, do not pass go, do not collect $200. So let's go and run this and just see what happens. And we don't need to input anything because we have the arrays already. Okay, what is the percent of increase? Let's go 10. And so that looks good. So it's 1 and 11, 68. So we're pretty good in there. Pause is not recognized as an external command, so I must have a syntax error in there. But it looks to me like it's correct in here. So if I go down and look at our data, the first one is 10, so the price increase would be $1, and that would be $11. This is $6.75, so it should be 68 cents rounded off. And then we have 23, which is $2.30. That makes sense. So it looks like we're doing good here, and then we do have some kind of an error. So let's go down and look here. System pause, and yes, we do. So that takes care of that. And we can get rid of some of these blank lines. We don't need it. You should never put more blank lines than you need in the program. So now that we have this, let's write a little function that prints them out. So what we'll do here, and also remember, if I wanted to do 5, this would work just fine. However, if you wanted to do 10 or more, you have to have the amount in here. I'm not 100% sure what will happen if you have more in here than what's here. It could overwrite something. You just need to make sure that you match this with this in here. So we're good over here. So let's write a little function that says, let's do the price. And we'll just print out the new prices. So we need a function called print prices or print new prices. And we have to pass the double array. Now remember one thing, and I'll show you how to fix that later. When you're passing the double over here array, you could accidentally change it, but you can prevent it from being changes by calling it as a constant, which I'll go over with you on Tuesday exactly how to do that. It's really easy. So let's see if we can get the magical screwdriver, which we had. And we'll just put, we can call it prices. It doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want. But because we are passing an array, we're passing it by reference. So we have to be very, very careful of what we're doing. So now we have one problem. We don't know how many prices there are. If we can't pass it, we have to pass the max prices. Or, because it's a constant, it's perfectly acceptable to put up here so it's globally, which means it'll be seen by the entire program. If you didn't like doing that, then you would have to create an integer here and pass max prices. So this takes care of this. So for printing it, it's basically the same thing. For integer I equals 0, I less than max prices, and then I plus plus. Then what we're just going to do is see out price of item. Now here is one of the exceptions for doing a calculation in a cout when you're doing an index, because we have to add 1 to it. Otherwise it'll be 0. And I can actually show you a little trick, but I don't really want to. You could actually do fancy, and if you wanted to do it in here, you could do plus plus I, which would increment it first, but you really don't want to do it, and then you would have to eliminate this over here, and that causes all kinds of things. So make it very simple. The more things you do at once, the more chances you have of making a mistake. So now we're just going to do prices of I, and then our endl. Then do we have IO manip up here? We do. So what we're going to do here now is do our cout fixed, and then we're going to do set precision to 2. Now remember, setting precision does not round it. It just displays it differently. So if we wanted to round it, we would use the round function. So let's see exactly what happens. Now, the only thing we should have to put in is our percentages. So going once, going twice. And what is the percent? So we'll start with 10 again. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the reason why this did not work, because we never called this function. So we need to go back after this and get it. Now we're going to call print new prices. And all we have to do is pass prices. You do not have to put in any brackets or anything like that. Just prices is fine. So let's go and put in 10 and see what happens. So prices of item. So we have a little cosmetic, but you can see 2, 3. So let's fix the cosmetic in here. And let's change this to new price of item and just for the heck of it, let's put in a tab character. That's a \T. Now, that's not necessarily going to line everything up peachy keen, but I wanted to introduce you to it as something that you can utilize if you want. You can also use the set the width. All right, so let's try this again. And new price of item 1, so everything looks good. The downside of it, it doesn't line up from the right. There's all kinds of ways to do that, which way you want to line it, whether the default is to the left, but in this particular case, we want to align it to the right. So to me, this looks like we did a pretty good job. So you would go back and test it. So let's go and try 15% this time. So now we have, looks pretty good. So we have 150, which makes sense. So far everything looks pretty good. So there's many things that we can do to improve this function as well. By, like I said, by setting the alignment to the right so the decimal points come in. We can use a set width, and there's tons of things that we can do, but this is the start of it. So what I always tell everybody, take your function, get it working right, make sure everything's peachy keen, make a copy of it, the working copy of it, then go to town and make changes. As long as you have a working copy of it, then you're in good shape. So that's all we have for this one. I will post this very shortly after we meet today.